Pauline Rogers, welcome to Those Who Give a Damn podcast. I am extremely excited to have you on as my first guest for Women History Month. Out of all transparency, I've had a long relationship with Pauline Rogers growing up in Mississippi. Pauline, one of the things that come to mind is Hurricane Katrina. And that was
Yes.
my first experience with you on advocacy. So I am just so delighted to have you with me today and to share you with the world and all the great work that you've done across Mississippi, and not just Mississippi, but across the country. Um, Pauline, I always like to open up my podcasts with understanding the lived experiences of our guests. Pauline, your story is both heartbreaking and it's also inspiring, right? I read the story about your mother's experience, and it kind of led you into some of your work that you're doing today. Can you share with my listeners what your childhood was like and those early experiences which shaped the woman that you are today and the work that you're doing across the country?
I am a product, like I said, of my lived experience. Pauline Rogers, again, I was born in rural Mississippi, Van Cleve in particular, born and raised there, and very poor. What I look at as poor now was different, but as a child growing up, we stuffed quilts, to stop leaks and that kind of thing. I'm the oldest of 11. Growing up, my grandmother and my mother always instilled in me that it was my duty and responsibility to help with younger siblings. Well, I always heard that all my life. So I thought that was cooking, cleaning, making sure they got their bath, homework, and put it bed. Fast forward a couple of years forward, I watched my father be killed at the hands of my mother when I was a child. My mother was thrust off to jail, this loving, kind, sweet woman. Oh, and there I ended up watching my life take a drastic turn. I was in a state of what I call now depression. I didn't know what to label it then except fear, covering because this loving woman who had never harmed a flea had now shot and somebody had died. And when I look at it now, uh, it stemmed from everything, poverty, and then still in that rural town, the lack of medical hospitals and medical units to take care of us. So I ended up trying to figure out what my role was to help out. I was a church girl. So I would dress my siblings, look in the local thrifty papers, the penny pincher, and we would go to every accessible funeral. Not to grieve with bereaved families, but to get there because there was always food at a repast. And I would take that food home. And back decades ago, you could easily leave a funeral with a whole casserole, a whole dish of something. And I would take that food back home and line it up on the table and pray over that food and continue the process, repeat, until one day one of my siblings, after crying so hard because funerals were sad occasions, that I felt like my cover was blown when she asked me who that was, and I didn't know. And so my shoplifting spiral. When I was growing up, shoplifting was if you took the last cookie out of the cookie jar or the last cup of milk, that was stealing. You had to ask for permission. So my shoplifting increased, and I got caught shoplifting in Sears and Roebuck, stealing clippers. My brother got tired of me using scissors and a comb to cut his hair, leaving patches. So I went and stole some clippers for him to cut his hair. And I got arrested. Well, when I got arrested that first time, that police officer arrested me, put me in the car, gave me a pep talk on the way home, but he didn't keep me in jail and he gave me $7. I didn't learn a lesson. Mississippi had a law on the book that 3 strikes, you're out. 3 strikes meant whatever you got caught shoplifting with, regardless of the amount, they called back then the big house. So it was there, which was prison. So it was there in the big house, prison with a 6-year sentence is where reality of mass incarceration hit me, that there were people, it looked like one big bedroom where you just had a bunch of beds and you didn't know who it was that was sleeping in the bedroom with you. It was one big bedroom filled with all these people. And I was in culture shock that we had such a thing that existed in this country. And it was there where my passion because I heard people say they had made parole, could not leave because they did not have a verifiable address. And I thought, well, that's crazy. How do you make parole and you're still here? It doesn't make sense. You're either paroled or you're not. And so, because I couldn't comprehend that. And I thought, all of us kids all we have is ideas. We kids say when they say they want to be a drummer, a police officer, firefighter, and a professional ball player, they are 100% serious when they say that. But here come the dream killers and say, just pick you one thing and focus on that. Well, you don't have to do one thing, I've learned. But it was sitting in that prison, Dr. Malone, that I learned and discovered my purpose. And when I left that prison on December the 4th, in 87, December the 5th, I was right back in the prison and still doing the work that we're doing now.
Wow. And Pauline, let me ask you this, and you've messed up my line of questioning, which is very good. How is it, when I asked you that question, you immediately went into sharing your story without shame, without any reservation? How have you become so resilient to tell your story? Because we understand that when we tell our story and we tell what happened and how we overcame, it changed the lives of other people who are experiencing this. I want you to share with my listeners, because so many people are afraid to tell their story, to share what they've been through. And that was a dark side of your life at that point, being put into prison.
Yes.
Why are you so unapologetically unafraid to share your story?
Because in prison, I learned, Dr. Malone, that there are so many other people living in prison, still trapped in childhood experiences, because we have created an environment where we put shame, stigma, judgment on people for something that most have no control over. Where incest happened, or you grew up all of your life thinking that this was my dad, only to discover decades later when you were now an adult or a married adult that was not your father. So it's all of these sins of others that we have thrust other people to live in these false spaces and created an environment to live in shame and stigma. That I've learned through telling my story that it is healing for others. It is deliverance for others. And that's what we should be doing, delivering and healing other people.
And not only are you doing that in words and deeds, but Pauline, you're also doing that through your foundation. Your foundation is a beacon of hope for people all across the world. Can you tell the listeners more about your foundation, and not just about it, but also how they can support it?
Our foundation is called Reaching and Educating for Community Hope Foundation. And we use acronyms RECH and pronounce it REACH. We provide reentry housing to women coming out of prison. However, in the past, we have housed men, but we primarily set up to house women. And right now in our state, we are the only provider that take women on the sex registry. And we've been doing this over 3 decades. And we to date, 7 to currently 2024, no one, after having stayed out of prison, completed the program first, stayed out of prison, a consecutive 3 years, has ever gone back to prison. Not one. It blows us away. And the only thing I can attribute it to, Dr. Malone, is we create opportunities for people to succeed. We don't tell them we're not a dictatorship, we're a stewardship. We steward them in their process.
Absolutely. And when we talk about, creating opportunities, Pauline, I want you to elaborate a little bit more on that, because when we look at opportunities, just like so many Americans, it's happening on the ground level, it's happening on the state and local level. How can the federal government and leaders here in Washington help to make sure that those resources are on the ground for organizations and foundations like yourself and individuals who are transitioning from the prison system?
You need people at the table with the lived experience. This is not a cookie cutter. It's not in a textbook. The textbook is the experience book. You need those with the lived experience at the table. And we also need to be the ones leading with the resources, because we have the answers. And that's one thing that the federal government needs to do, have people like myself at the table. And not only at the table, I would love to see the federal government create a funding source that is 100% led by justice impacted, formerly incarcerated people, that we channel where those resources go, because we know who's actually doing the work. And I'm not talking about creating a celebrity status of who's doing it, but actually boots on the ground, and especially targeting those areas where the problems are the most and the worst. And that is in the Deep South, the hub of all this country's consequential fights and battles, hub from the Deep South, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, these southern states are where the hubs of this, but Mississippi in particular is number one at the top of that list. And so our foundation has been on the front lines of a lot of these issues before reentry became this sexy topic. We didn't have a model. And a lot of people ask us now, well, why isn't your face illuminated on billboards? Why aren't you on national stages and national platforms? Well, I'm on Dr. Malone's show. Who gives a damn? And that just felt good to say that you do. And that's why we're here, because you give a damn. And I'm on the show to talk about it because you asked the question.
And that's what we're here for. We want to elevate those voices so that you do have a seat at the political table of power where decisions are made. Pauline, you talked about Mississippi in particular, which is going to lead me to my next question. Mississippi, like many states, faces its challenges in the criminal justice system. From your experiences, what are the critical areas that need attention? And what reforms do you believe would make the most significant difference?
Mississippi is in need of so many reforms. We need parole reform. Right now, we have a 100% Republican-led parole board, and nothing in criminal justice or any other particular area should be 100% anything. Blacks aren't 100. None of us are 100% Black, because we came from slavery, where you had to be mixed, and cattle, your wife or your spouse may have been taken to mate with this one because they wanted a certain breed and a certain look. The master did. So parole reform is definitely number one that we need. Well, I won't say number one, because my number ones would just run across the same line of ones. We need parole reform in that area. We need parole board reform. And then we need a constitutional liberty interest law in the state of Mississippi. We don't have a constitutional liberty interest law, which grants people eligibility for parole. And most states have that constitutional liberty interest. And when you don't have it, you have these people of power who can just sit up and decide who never gets out. Like, we got a guy serving 65 mandatory years. He's already done 35 of those years on a marijuana drug charge, which some people will be listening to this, smoking it as I'm saying the sentence. And he's a number one welder in this state. So a lot of reforms in that area, everything is punitive, punishment on top of punishment. So we need reforms that would allow people who have served their time, the eligibility to get out, and parole issues. And then we need healthcare issues, that people will actually get healthcare and dignity. We need dignity legislation where people can be treated humanely and with dignity while incarcerated.
Wow. Pauline, that is really good. I got to bring you on to talk with. I just recently had a conversation with some high schoolers, and we talked about healthcare in America. And I am having an aha moment here, because I never really looked at the healthcare through the lenses even of the prison system, right? And what that looks like, right? And making sure that we have that adequate healthcare while people are in the system. And I think sometimes that goes lost on us. But I do think we have to have more conversation around making sure that we are providing them with the same service as we would provide any other human being, and making sure that we are remembering that when we are talking about healthcare and legislating that across the country. Wow,
Right.
that makes sense. That makes sense. We got to have a follow up on that, Pauline, because my high schoolers are engaging in healthcare, and I just had an aha moment. I would love to hear their views about the healthcare system as it relates to those who are incarcerated. Right?
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
powerful. That's powerful. Pauline, my other question goes into for women who are
Hmm.
currently incarcerated and those who may have been recently released. What is your message to them in reclaiming their rights and their dignity? When I look at you today, you have your rights and your dignity, and without reservation, you are walking in your divine calling. And there are
Mm.
many women that are going to be released from prison or coming out of prison, and they are going to go back into the workforce. How do they reclaim their rights and their dignity?
The dignity has to be bestowed upon them and given to them during incarceration. Their rights came when they were born in this country. It's like voting rights. Voting rights should never be stripped of anyone based on what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that if you are a citizen of the U.S. of A., that you have these certain inalienable rights. And when you come out of prison, you serve the time that was ordered on you on the courts. When you come out, all of those rights should be restored to you. You shouldn't have to go through any type of process. You have fulfilled what the court has ordered. You should come out and be able to vote. And I'm speaking about that in particular because it was appealed. The U.S. Fifth District Court of Appeals decision was appealed by our Attorney General here, Lynn Fitch, which it shouldn't be. You can't call us a citizen of the Constitution, and the Constitution says this, and then you treat us like something else. You got to give us another name. You can't call us a citizen, and we don't have citizenship rights. So those rights should be restored. That's one of the things that we need in this country, the restoration of rights. And what was that last part that you asked me?
Not just their rights, but also their dignity.
That mhm.
Right? Because when I started off with you, Pauline, you started to share your story without shame, without any reservation, right? With such dignity and class. And how do we re-enter women into their dignity, that grace that women bring to our society? Because so many times women, when they go through things that are viewed as shame in our society, they lose that side of their dignity, their class, and their style in our community. How do we restore that piece?
We give it to them while they're incarcerated. The flip side of the coin is what happens during incarceration. Staff, you're either going to become a part of that dogma system or you won't stay. There's no way you can stay. If you stay, most people adapt to that system. Not all, because there are cases. I had a lady that impacted my life while I was incarcerated, who I named the home after, Wendy Hatcher. It's a known fact. But give them dignity while they're there. Everybody loves $100 bill. Everybody, we love money. It takes money to whatever. However, when you can just continually walk over a penny and see no value in that penny, do you really value that $100 bill? Because if I take one penny, just one, out of that $100 bill, it's no longer 100. So I'm just saying we have to see value, and we have to treat people with dignity and with value, and treat them as if the creators, not that we created them to be, that the creator created them to be. And every person's role is different. So we have to be intentional and individual. You can't legislate that. You can put it in legislation, but it has to come from an inward place of treating people with moral dignity and respect that they deserve. So we have to do it on an individual scale, but it also needs to be on a legislative scale that if you fall into this, this is the consequences.
Because as we said, we all have lived experiences. And so before we go into the complete the sentence segment of my podcast, I really wanted to kind of tie in why I asked you about that dignity question, because I've seen you do the work. My own lived experiences, you were there for me when my mom went through her prison experience. And I saw my mom come out of prison and not get the adequate treatment. If you remember, she was going through cancer at the time.
Absolutely.
And when she came out, she was like a zombie. And you all helped her, you and your husband, helped me nurse my mother back to her dignity, right? To go on to get her master's degree and to get her, BS degree from Alcorn, and really helped us to help her understand her value again. So me talking to you today, Pauline, wasn't just me inviting someone, that I knew, but it was me inviting someone that I have seen do the work, and I have seen your magic at work. I've seen it at work. And I want to just say to you, I am so grateful to God for you helping me through my mother's prison experience and helping her to gain her dignity again and re-enter into the workforce, and re-enter into society as a citizen. And I'm so grateful for you for that. So I don't just know you from what I see on paper and et cetera. I've seen your work and your impact that it had in my own life, right? And I'm grateful for that. And so as we move forward, Pauline, I want to talk about the future of this country. In every segment, we talk about, I have my guests to complete sentences and kind of give me their responses. As I was talking to you, I only prepared one, but I have two now as I was talking to you, because we want to elevate these voices. The first question I'm going to ask you is, in the future of America, I believe that women's rights, the prison system, and all society as a whole will,
The voices of the experience.
wow, hear the voices of the experience. And this leads me to my next question. Not necessarily my next question, but your next response to me. If Vice President Harris was watching or listening to this podcast today, what would be your message for the administration in regards to prison reform, and particularly around women?
Send for me.
Same for you, absolutely.
You need the Deep South, the hub of the country's problem, but also one of the leading who has succeeded in reducing not only recidivism for the past 3 decades, going into the 4th decade. I am classified by my own saying a solutionist. I can talk about problems all day long, but they won't get solved. I wrote a piece of legislation, not legislation, however, policy on what parchment needs to happen, one of our prisons. And I've been holding it for a while. One of our state senators just proposed this week in legislative session that he'd been working on closing out that place. Now is the time to submit that to somebody to hear. So sometimes you can be ahead of time when it comes to incarceration. And what I would say to Vice President Harris as a woman, to listen again to the voices of those where the problem, the deepest, the strongest, the worst, and find also in that same place how solutions have come about and put us at the table, and we can create a master plan that we can spread all across this country to making our problems better because solutions have been added on how we solve them.
Very good. That's a wrap. Awesome.